What is up, guys? In today's video, I'm going to be going over some tips to hopefully help you win the boss locations and get those mythic weapons and medallions more often. As always, if you guys do find this video helpful, informative, interesting, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you like to see more, and comment down below which of these boss locations is your favorite, which one you like landing at most. So you guys probably know this, but if you were unaware, the way Fortnite changed these boss POIs this season is in the past, the boss and its kind of guards and minions would populate the POI from the moment the game starts. Now, the way it works is that you have to basically summon the boss by knocking over the statue, which will kind of be marked by a column on the map. And when you do that, the boss will spawn, or the minions will start to spawn, and each boss has like several phases where you have to kill kind of like a wave or two of minions until the boss itself spawns. And then I think each boss will just constantly summon minions once the boss has spawned on the map. So you have to like kind of thin out the minions, then the boss will spawn, and then you can kind of focus them and hopefully eliminate them. So it takes a bit longer than it did in the past with like some previous boss POIs. If you were quick about it, you could just kill the boss very quickly. Not as much last season because they had the extra shield, but like older boss POIs, like people would just rush the boss super quick. Now with these stages, it takes a little bit longer. And like I said, there's a column on the map that will show where you have to go to start the boss fight. But you can also use this piece of information if you're not at the POI to kind of know if the boss has been spawned yet. Because my understanding of how these indicators work is the column will be on the map until the boss itself spawns on the map. Once the boss spawns, like they've progressed up to like the first two stages, then the column will no longer show on the map. And I'm kind of confused about if the boss shows on the map because there seems to be some inconsistency here. Earlier on in the season, it seemed like the medallion of the boss would show on the map once they spawned in if you were close enough to the POI. Recently, though, I feel like I've been seeing the medallion from the boss show on the map, like even when I'm very far away. It's just kind of tough sometimes with Fortnite to know, like, is this a bug that I'm seeing it across the map now? Or was it a bug that I wasn't seeing it in the past? It's really hard to know. But just in short, if you see the column on the map, then the boss hasn't spawned yet. If you don't see the column on the map, then the boss has probably spawned and maybe even been eliminated. And you can kind of use this information to your advantage different points in the game. If you see a medallion player near you, right, and you're not sure which one it is, and you look at the map and you see like, oh, Underworld medallion wasn't taken, that's like deep in storm. Mount Olympus medallion wasn't taken, that one's deep in storm. And then the Ares medallion also wasn't taken, the columns are still there, but those POIs are in storm. Then you can know that, like, okay, that's the Grim Gate medallion. And that situation won't always arise exactly like that, but if you have info on the other medallions, like let's say you have some and you see that others aren't taken, you can use process of elimination to know which medallion you're about to fight against, which may or may not be helpful to you. As far as fighting the POIs themselves, though, these areas are often going to be pretty contested, like very populated with other players wanting to land there and get the mythic and get the medallion. They're always high priority. And they're also going to be very third-partied from any neighboring POI or location. So the first thing and the most obvious thing, I think, is you need to get a good landing. And you also need to learn the POIs and learn where the loot spawns, learn where the barrels are, learn how people play the POI so that you can kind of predict how these situations are going to play out. And I think the only way you can kind of build this knowledge is by just getting the reps in and landing there. You might land there a few times, get no gun, GG's. But as you land there more often and you learn where the loot spawns and you learn how people play the POI, that's going to make it much easier for you to clear the POI and come out on top more often in these locations. And that is true with any spot on the map that you land, but the boss POIs are just always kind of like different because they're very chaotic. Typically, there's a lot of people landing there. You have to deal with the boss and the AI there. And then I kind of already said, there's always people third-partying these POIs. Trying to get that free mythic or that free medallion. So like the difficulty of these POIs just tends to be higher. And so you need to, I feel like, have better knowledge of these POIs in order to consistently come out on top. When I play these spots, even last season with the boss POIs, I like to just land and focus on looting up and kind of getting my situation in the game right, taking out the other players. And then once fighting has slowed down, I go to start the boss. Some people really like to be sure that the POI is entirely clear and that there's nobody else there before they start the boss encounter. I'm somewhat fine with starting the boss encounter while I know there's a few other players there, as long as I'm not like actively fighting them. You know, if they're shooting at me, then I'm gonna fight them. But like, if I'm like kind of suspicious that like, hey, I haven't necessarily gone to that other side, but I don't really hear fighting anymore, I might start the boss encounter. And there's a few reasons for this, because like, one, people can play pretty ratty at these POIs, so starting the boss encounter can sometimes kind of like put pressure on them and get them to come out. A lot of people trying to hide just straight run at you as soon as you start the boss encounter because they think that you're like very distracted in that, right? The boss encounters can also take quite a long time to complete because there are several stages to it. So if you can kind of start the boss encounter, clear the first stage, and then maybe like the other players in the POI come to fight you, you eliminate them, now you're on stage 2, and you just kind of are more efficiently using your time, I think, which is important because people will come to these POIs to third party you. So the more efficient you can be with your time, I feel like the less likely it is you get third partied. And there is kind of a balance here, you know, you don't want to start it just immediately when you don't have any loot and then there's still a lot of players at the POI. Like that could work out, but it isn't the most likely thing to work out, you know? But starting it when you have, you know, decent loot, decent shield, maybe some shockwaves, the fighting has slowed down, but you're still kind of suspicious that there might be people here, that would be a time where I would start it, and I think that could be pretty time efficient. When you're doing the boss though and going through the stages, I think it's very important that you don't pay too much attention to the boss or the minions themselves. Like they're not very threatening as long as you don't just like stand there and let them kill you. The main threat is still going to be the other players in the POI and the incoming third parties. So the biggest mistake I think you can make in these like boss POIs is being too tunnel visioned on the boss fight, and being like too consumed in that and letting your guard down, and also kind of standing out in a vulnerable location when you're fighting the boss. I can't tell you how many times I've come to one of these POIs to third party it, and there's just a guy like standing out in the open just shooting wolves, and it's like the freest kill ever, you know? You want to stand in an area where you kind of limit the angles you're exposed to. That way potential third parties don't have an as easy of a time fighting you. And you want to kind of clear the boss and clear the minions and the waves of them as you can, but don't be too tunnel vision on it. Like if you have to focus 100% of your effort on that, it's going to be much easier for other players to third party you and eliminate you, and like the hiding and the ratting players in the POI to come out and take advantage of you being distracted. But if you can kind of take out waves of enemies and still be more concerned about your surroundings and other players, I think that's going to be ideal. And like I said, also just standing in a spot that limits the angles you're exposed to is so simple, but it can go a long way in decreasing like how problematic a third party potentially is. I think visual audio, which is a setting you can turn on in the audio settings, can also be very helpful for this, mainly at the POIs that summon wolves, because the boss's footsteps will show on visual audio, but that's it. So any other players in the area, it's very easy to see like, oh, those are footsteps, that's the third party. It's a bit harder in like the Ares one, and I think Zeus also will summon like guards that show on footstep audio. But either way, like visual audio and using audio to your advantage can be really helpful in kind of increasing your awareness and decreasing how likely it is that you just get caught off guard. And I also like to try to take out the boss and its minions with just like an AR or an SMG, and always keep my shotgun loaded, because if you are going to get third partied, it's likely going to be a close range fight. So having your shotgun not loaded because you were killing a minion or a wolf with it that wasn't even very threatening to begin with is just not ideal. And then on the flip side of this, if you're at the POI and someone else starts the boss encounter, you can take advantage of them potentially being distracted by it. It's kind of the inverse of everything I just talked about. If they're standing out in the open, that's an easy kind of engage for you to maybe get like a snipe on them or DMR shots or even just AR shots and start that fight with a good amount of damage. You know, a lot of people, for some reason, fight these bosses in a weird way, I think. And then also, like, if you hear them shooting a shotgun, especially a gatekeeper shotgun, then that can be like great timing to take advantage of. But you also want to assume that they know they're going to get third partied and they're ready to get third partied. I think that would be the biggest thing that I kind of touched on before, is it's like when you're fighting these bosses, be very ready to get third partied. And then the inverse of that is true. If somebody else is fighting the boss, don't just assume that they're entirely consumed in that boss fight. Like, you do want to third party them, but don't just run in there thinking it's a free kill. If I do hear them shooting their shotgun, though, I might just shockwave on them in hopes to just like catch them not loaded. But like more often than not, I think look for decent timing instead of just like sprinting at them. These bosses take quite a while. If they're only on stage 1 or 2 and the boss hasn't even spawned in yet, that's why I talked about like seeing the medallion on the map. You know, like, okay, the boss has spawned in and you see the boss's health getting low. Maybe at that point you need to be a little more like, need to have a higher sense of urgency. But if they're only on stage 1 or 2, it's not like you need to rush them and get them down like immediately. You know, they're not just going to take it and leave. And that was kind of a problem with some of like the earlier boss encounters or boss POIs in earlier Fortnite, was that people could rush the boss down and just leave. I think also you might want to just consider landing at a nearby location or POI and then just third partying the boss POI, especially Grim Gate. It typically will take quite a while for other players to kind of clear that POI and fight the boss. That seems to be the most contested one. So I've had decent success landing at like Pleasant, Piazza, or other surrounding POIs or areas, and just being able to third party and get the Grim Gate medallion for basically for free. So that might be something you also want to consider doing if you want to take advantage of the medallion, or you want to take advantage of the mythic, but you don't like fighting the boss POI, or you don't like dealing with that chaos off spawn. You can just land somewhere else and then third party it. And that has also always been a thing as long as we've had mythic locations in Fortnite. And because of that, on the inverse, on the flip side, if I am the person that gets the medallion or the mythic, I just want to leave ASAP. Like sticking around and still continuing to loot and just kind of taking too long to leave, I think makes it more likely for other third parties to eliminate you. So pretty much always, as soon as I get that done, I'm leaving that area and I'm leaving that POI just to, you know, reduce the likelihood of us getting third partied, because you do put a target on your head and a lot of people will see you pick up the medallion. And then if they were coming to third party it, they're going to be like coming even faster now. But that is going to be it for this video. I hope you guys found this helpful, informative, interesting. As always, if you did, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.